Observation 1. Inherency. The U.S. efforts to halt the trafficking of firearms to Mexico is deficient. Subpoint A. Legislative authority to halt firearms trafficking is inadequate. Milhalco 2012. The United States has a strong policy favoring limited regulation of firearm ownership. At the federal level, the Gun Control Act of 1968 permits a wide range of purchasing and sale rights to licensed dealers, including rights to interstate and foreign transfer weapons. The Act also places limits on who may own and purchase firearms. Additionally, it regulates the administration of federal permits to sell firearms, and in many instances, it allows licensed sellers to transport an unlimited number of weapons in interstate and foreign commerce, without reporting those sales to federal authorities. Particularly relevant to arms trafficking, the Act makes it illegal for a licensed dealer to knowingly transfer weapons to an unlicensed person who lives out of state. Yet it permits the sale of weapons to an unlicensed person if the transaction is completed at the dealer's place of business. Similarly, under the Act, it is illegal for any seller to transfer a firearm to a prohibited person, although the enforcement mechanisms are limited to licensed dealers. As a result, the problem of illicit sales by unlicensed dealers falls outside the scope of the Act. Subpoint B. Current enforcement of firearms trafficking statutes is inadequate. Shirk 2011. Lethal firearms, ammunition, and explosives sold both legally and illegally in the United States arm the cartels and are a major contributing factor to Mexico's violence. Since an estimated 10% of U.S. gun dealers are located along the U.S.-Mexico border, and powerful U.S. gun lobbies have effectively hamstrung efforts to enforce existing laws or otherwise regulate access to deadly, high-powered weapons. Observation 2. Harms. Mexican drug cartel violence is significantly harmful. Subpoint A. Drug cartels have unleashed an orgy of violence on Mexican civilians. Grillo 2011. Anyone on the planet with half an eye on the TV knows there is an orgy of butchery in Mexico. The country is so deep in blood it is hard to shock anymore. Even the kidnapping and killing of 9 policemen or a pile of craniums in a town plaza isn't big news. One of the most sensational atrocities now grab media attention. A grenade on attack on a crowd celebrating Independence Day. The sewing of a murder victim's face onto a soccer ball. An old silver mine filled with 56 decaying corpses, some of the victims thrown in alive. The kidnapping and shooting of 72 migrants, including a pregnant woman. Mexico reels from massacres comparable to brutal war crimes. Subpoint B. Most firearms used by drug cartels come from the United States. Milhalco 2012. U.S. and Mexican government officials estimate that the DTOs primarily use guns originating in the United States. The United States estimates that thousands of guns are smuggled into Mexico every year, often orchestrated by the DTOs themselves. The United States hosts nearly 7,000 gun stores along the Mexican border. Moreover, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has determined that approximately 87% of firearms seized by Mexican authorities in the last 5 years originated in the United States, with heavy concentrations of relevant purchases in Texas, California, and in Arizona. In total, tracing data from guns seized after drug crimes demonstrate that 90% of the firearms originate in the United States. Subpoint C. U.S. firearms are responsible for the escalation of violence in Mexico. Olson 2011. As the rivalries between criminal organizations increase and the Mexican government more directly challenge organized crime, the demand for firearms increased dramatically, especially for more sophisticated military firearms from the United States. In the last 3 years, we have witnessed the use of weapons in open combat with rival organizations, and often resulting in the increasing lethality of these attacks and the deaths of innocent bystanders. The resulting murder rate is now 7 times what it was at the beginning of the decade, and Mexico's democratic governance is at serious risk. The most recent data from the government of Mexico shows a 60% increase in homicides between 2009 and 2010, with last year being the most violent since the beginning of the Calderon administration, with approximately 15,300 people killed in organized crime-related violence. Subpoint D. Because of firearms trafficking, the cartels are better armed than the police. Weintraub 2010. The enforcers for the drug cartels are well supplied with such weapons as powerful AR-15s, AK-47s, Colt 38 Supers, and others, most of which come from the United States. In many head-to-head battles, the drug cartel enforcers are better armed than the Mexican police. Therefore, we as the Affirmative team present the following plan. The United States federal government will substantially increase its economic engagement towards Mexico by adopting the Firearm Trafficking Prevention Act with the following provisions. 1. It shall be a felony to ship, transport, transfer, or otherwise dispose to a person firearms if the transferor knows or has reasonable cause to believe that the firearms are destined for distribution in Mexico in violation of any U.S. federal law or applicable Mexican law. 2. The U.S. federal government will fully fund enforcement of existing firearms trafficking statutes by expanding the use of Project Gunrunner Impact Teams, also known as GRIT, along the entire U.S. border. Observation 3. Solvency. Adopting the Firearm Trafficking Prevention Act will significantly reduce drug cartel violence. Subpoint A. Stronger legislative authority will reduce drug cartel violence. Young, 2012. In sum, if the United States is serious about providing tools to stem drug violence in Mexico, throwing money at the problem through the Merida Initiative or even coordinating law enforcement efforts is not enough. Passing a robust firearms trafficking statute that provides positive extraterritorial effects is necessary for stopping Mexican drug violence, regardless of the very local opposition that will likely result from such a statute. In the realm of drug violence, this is an area of the law for which the extraterritorial effects of such a domestic criminal statute should trump the legislative concerns, the gun lobby's concerns, and the Conservative Caucus concerns over the passage of such a statute. Subpoint B. Properly funded enforcement efforts will reduce drug cartel violence. Weintraub, 2010. The success of the ATF's Project Gunrunner Impact Teams is an example of what the ATF can do by enforcing existing legislations. As a part of Project Gunrunner, the ATF sent 100 experienced agents and industry operations investigators in GRIT teams to the Houston area from April to August 2009. In that 120-day period, GRIT teams developed more than 1,100 leads that turned into 276 criminal cases. In this period, GRIT teams were able to follow through on 87% of the leads developed. As a result of the efforts of these GRIT teams, the ATF seized 443 illegal firearms, 141,442 rounds of ammunition, 3 explosive devices, $165,234 in currency, 5 kilograms of cocaine, and 1,500 pounds of marijuana. The success of the GRIT teams demonstrates what the ATF can accomplish in cooperation with its Mexican counterparts when properly resourced. With more, the ATF can do more. Observation C. Mexico regards this issue as a top priority in its economic relations with the United States. Weintraub, 2010. In his address to the joint session of the U.S. Congress on May 20, 2010, President Felipe Calderón respectively called on U.S. lawmakers to re-examine gun laws in the United States and to make efforts to halt the stream of weapons south to Mexico. There is one issue where Mexico needs your cooperation, and that is stopping the flow of assault weapons and other deadly arms across the border. Subpoint D. Mexico's own firearm laws are very strict. Milhalka, 2012. In contrast, Mexico has adopted particularly strict gun control laws. Currently, there is only one firearm store in the entire country. It is located in Mexico City and operated by the military. In order to obtain a permit to own a firearm, a person must apply at a military base and demonstrate that 1. He lives an honest life, 2. Has completed any required military service, 3. Has not been convicted of any crimes involving weapons, and 4. Does not use any drugs. To receive a permit, a person must also show that he has a justifiable reason for owning a weapon, unless the person obtains a permit for use as a government employee. He must have his permit reissued every 2 years. Additionally, private ownership is limited to low-power firearms, primarily those smaller than a .22 caliber. Anyone who uses or sells a weapon of a higher caliber, especially those restricted for military use, may face a prison sentence of up to 30 years. In contrast to U.S. regulations, Mexico has established a national registry for firearms and requires that all weapons be reported to the government for inclusion in a database. And with that, I'm open for cross-examination and further points of clarification.